We here at Rasmussen Reports are not sensationalists, and so we don't say this often, but this could be the biggest, most consequential poll we've ever run. In fact, the last time I said that, in January, the topic was COVID-19 vaccine deaths. And here we are again with another set of COVID vaccine death questions. But as you'll soon see, the results here are even more chilling. But first, a note for YouTube censors. If you're watching on Twitter or Rumble, you can just skip this part. I am not a doctor. I'm a pollster. And all I'll be doing in this video is discussing public opinion. We asked over 1,000 American adults 3 simple questions. And all I'm doing in this video is reporting on the results. Now, with that out of the way, here's a warm-up question. Are you less concerned about COVID-19 or more concerned about COVID-19 than you were a year ago? 48% of American adults say they're less concerned, but 20% actually say they're more concerned about COVID than a year ago. 31% say their concern hasn't changed much, which honestly could be either high concern or low concern. But by almost a 2.5 to 1 margin, more Americans say less concerned than more concerned. Here are the party numbers. And although Democrats are more likely to say they're more concerned, it's only 31% of them, while 17% of Republicans, even more than independents, say they're more concerned. And only 55% of Republicans say they're less concerned. Before you wonder why that number for Republicans is so small, recall that time after time, over 60% of Republicans told us they were vaccinated for COVID-19. But here are the age numbers, and this is straight up disturbing. 18 to 39-year-olds are far more likely to say they're more concerned. And I really don't know what's going on there. It could be possible some people are lumping vaccine-related concerns in here. It could be overdependence on mainstream media. I'd love your thoughts. The signal isn't just being driven by adults under 40, though, but almost exclusively by men under 40, of whom 47% say they're more concerned than a year ago, and only 27% say less concerned. By contrast, only 21% of women under 40 say they're more concerned than a year ago. With voters' high expectations of a war with China on the near horizon, this 47% of men under 40 number, well more than twice as high as everyone else being more concerned about COVID, is probably the single most frightening number I've seen about America's future prospects. But now we get to the meat of this thing. Has any member of your household died from COVID-19? 11% of American adults say yes, and 86% say no. That's an astounding number, but let's take a moment to wrap our heads around the ramifications. The official reported COVID death numbers are now north of 1 million Americans, but here, almost 30 million Americans are saying they know someone who died in their household. Clearly, more than one person in a household would answer yes to this question if someone died, but that still doesn't explain the huge disparity in numbers. What we're likely seeing here is an overinflation of the number due to people's loose definition of the term household. But here's the thing. We did not ask this question to try to arrive at the official number of COVID deaths. In fact, we weren't even trying to get any specific answer here. What we were doing was setting an extremely important benchmark for the very next question, which you're absolutely going to want to hold on for. Men and women answered this question the same, which is an important validation of this signal. And among age, younger people were more likely to say yes. To me, that logically fits with what are most likely larger families at younger ages. So far, everything's checking out. Hispanic and other race Americans were about 8 points more likely than white and black Americans to say yes. And again, that could be the comparative size of families. But here are the party numbers. Democrats said yes more than Republicans and independents. For the independent signal, my guess is that these people tend towards being more single. But I have no idea why Democrats said yes 4 points more than Republicans. Before people shout things like alternative COVID treatments, keep in mind this very well could at least somewhat be driven by noise. Now, married adults and adults with children at home also said yes by about 6 points more than those who weren't married or had kids. And again, that checks with what you'd expect logically. But here are the income numbers, and this is fascinating. It isn't a huge signal, but it's clear and it's uninterrupted. Those with the highest incomes are most likely to say yes. And that's despite the fact that they ostensibly have access to the best medical services. Before we get to the big one, let me take a moment to make a humble appeal. As the stories we run get more important, it gets harder to have our polling results seen. And for no cost, you can support our work by subscribing to our channel on Rumble or YouTube and by following us on Twitter. And finally, it's time for the question you've all been waiting for. But first, let's flash back to the last question and refresh ourselves for a moment that 11% of American adults said a member of their household died from COVID-19. Now, has any member of your household died whose death you think may have been caused by side effects of the COVID-19 vaccines? And here are the results. 10% of American adults say yes. And if you dig into the decimals without rounding, it's only 0.6% less than the percent of Americans that say a member of their household died from COVID. Let me restate that. Almost the exact same number of Americans say someone in their household died from COVID and someone in their household died from the COVID vaccines. As you can see, the magnitude of the response is not relevant. These numbers, actual responses from 1,078 American adults with a margin of error of 3%, are telling us that someone in their household died from the vaccine. And I can confidently tell you it isn't an artifact of the weighting. In the unweighted data, about the same 10% still said yes to this question. So again, to spell out the implications, a real randomized and anonymous sample of Americans are telling us very clearly that based on their experiences of death in their families, the vaccine has claimed almost the same number of lives as COVID-19 itself has. Now into the demographics. Again, men and women are just about exactly the same, as you'd expect. And here's age. Roughly the same signal as before, but a little higher in the middle, and older ages are less sensitive to vaccine death. Race is again very similar, with Hispanic and other race Americans a little more pronounced. But here's party. Again, almost the same, but Republicans are here slightly higher than Democrats. Why? It's most likely because Republicans are more sensitive to news on vaccine safety concerns, as they've told us repeatedly in our polling. But here's the important part. They're only 2 points apart. Not 30 points, not 20 points, not even 10 points. Republicans and Democrats, eternally divided on almost every question we ask in our polling, on this are in extreme agreement. A significant number of them have experienced what they perceived to have been a vaccine death in their families. Now, if you're just catching up to our work, we're an independent news media publication that asks Americans questions, and we report transparently on the results. We have a track record of making really accurate election predictions, but most importantly, we don't take money from big companies like pharmaceutical giants, from dark money organizations, or from political parties. And when we're sponsored, we disclose the sponsorship every time. So we have integrity, you can trust us, but most importantly, it unshackles us to ask the questions that matter. This is now our third huge story on COVID-19 vaccines in the last 6 months. The first being our independent confirmation that vaccinated Americans have a 41% side effect rate and a 7% major side effect rate, and that 28% of American adults say they know someone personally who died from the vaccine. If you haven't seen those videos yet, they'll be linked at the end of this video on YouTube. If you're glad a pollster has finally asked these questions, please consider supporting us by becoming a paid subscriber at rasmussenreports.com. And if you think this story is one of the most important of our time, like we do, please take a moment to share it on social media. Stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.